Monte Carlo, Monaco, late afternoon. Tourists wander past designer boutiques and luxury cars. Amid the glamour, a heavy-set man with tattooed arms and a cold gaze steps out of a Rolls-Royce. He's flanked by burly bodyguards, moving with the quiet confidence of someone who knows he owns the street. Few onlookers realize they're in the presence of one of Europe's most notorious underworld figures. This man is Necati Arabaci, a former Hells Angels president and an infamous gangster whose criminal empire once spanned Germany, Turkey, and beyond. His very nickname, the Godfather of Cologne, hints at a legend that has grown in the shadows. In viral clips online, Arabaci appears almost like a movie character, a real-life outlaw basking in wealth and audacity, waving to cameras in Monte Carlo as if he hasn't a care in the world. It's a surreal sight, a convicted crime boss turned social media spectacle, strolling free in a playground for the rich. To understand how Necati Arabaci reached this brazen moment, we have to journey back to the beginning of his gritty, blood-soaked rise. Cologne, Germany, late 1990s. Neon lights flicker along the Kölner Ringe, the city's buzzing nightclub strip. Inside smoky bars and thumping clubs, a new power is taking hold of the night. Young Necati Arabaci lurks at the center of it. Born in 1972 to a Turkish immigrant family in Cologne, Arabaci grew up far from privilege. As a youth, he worked humble jobs, at one point a greengrocer's stall by day. But by night, he found his calling as a bouncer on the club doors. It was on those thresholds between the street and the dance floor that Arabaci learned the first rule of the underworld. Control who goes in and out, and you control the scene. Arabaci quickly proved himself more than just muscle at the door. By the turn of the millennium, he had united an entire crew of doormen and enforcers under his command. They were known on the street as the Arabaci clan, a network of fiercely loyal Turkish-German bouncers who guarded Cologne's nightlife and secretly its illicit underbelly. The clan made sure every dealer, pimp, or troublemaker kicked back a share for the privilege of operating in the clubs. And if anyone stepped out of line, Arabaci's men were there to show them the concrete. Cologne's red light district also fell under Arabaci's sway. His associates would befriend young women partying at the clubs, then coerce them into prostitution in the brothels he controlled. In back rooms and private apartments, Arabaci built a profitable empire of vice, protection rackets, sex trade, and underground casinos. By his late 20s, Necati Arabaci had transformed himself from a nightclub heavy into the criminal king of Cologne's nightlife. Whispers of his name spread in biker bars and back alleys. Even veteran gangsters gave the upstart a wary respect. The streets dubbed him Cologne's Godfather, not an Italian dons of old, but a new breed of gang boss born of Germany's immigrant quarters and the biker scene's brutality. By the early 2000s, Arabaci's rise caught the attention of an even larger underworld fraternity, the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club. The Hells Angels, famous for Harley-Davidsons and the Death's Head patch on their backs, had chapters across Germany. Arabaci's control of the Cologne scene made him a valuable ally, or a potential rival. Rather than resist him, the Angels brought him into their fold. Arabaci became a high-ranking member of the Hells Angels, leveraging their fearsome reputation while maintaining his own crew's autonomy. It was a potent combination, the biker gang's clout fused with Arabaci's criminal savvy. Under the Hells Angels banner, Arabaci's influence only expanded. He was now connected to a network of outlaws stretching from Germany's industrial heartland to the ports of Turkey. In Cologne, his red light rackets thrived behind the veneer of the motorcycle club, and he didn't hesitate to throw around the Hells Angels name to intimidate rivals or cow nightclub owners into obedience. If any rival gang, be it local mobsters or other biker clubs like the Bandidos, questioned his dominance, they were answered with broken bones or worse. Arabaci had become a one-man crime wave, riding a Harley by day and presiding over a criminal empire by night. For law enforcement, Arabaci had become public enemy number one in Cologne. His gang's brazen violence and expanding vice operations could no longer be ignored. So in 2002, as club-goers poured onto the streets in the early hours, police orchestrated a massive raid. Dozens of officers in riot gear stormed Arabaci's known hangouts and properties. Necati Arabaci was finally caught, dragged out in handcuffs as stunned party girls and gangsters looked on. It was the end of an era on the Kölner Ringer. The godfather of Cologne was in custody. The charges against him read like a catalogue of organized crime. Prosecutors accused Arabaci of pimping and forcing women into sex work, of trafficking humans across borders, of brutal assaults and extortion schemes, of weapons violations, and of masterminding a criminal organization. Practically every dirty deed in Cologne's underworld seemed to have his fingerprints on it. The trial that followed transfixed Germany's media. Here was a Hells Angels kingpin facing justice after years in the shadows. In 2004, Arabaci walked into the courtroom in handcuffs and shocked everyone by confessing to many of the charges. Perhaps he calculated that a confession would earn him leniency, or perhaps the evidence was simply overwhelming. He was sentenced to 9 years in prison, a hefty punishment meant to send a message that no one, not even a Hells Angel boss, was above the law. As the cell door clanged shut on Arabaci, authorities breathed a sigh of relief, thinking they had snuffed out one of the most violent crime networks in the country. But Arabaci's story was far from over. Locked behind German bars, one might expect Arabaci's power to wane. Instead, he remained as dangerous as ever. Even in prison, he kept giving orders to his crew on the outside. Investigators later found that Arabaci's influence still touched the Cologne brothels, notably a high-end club called the Colosseum in Augsburg, which continued running under his watch through intermediaries. It was as if prison walls meant nothing. Arabaci's empire was on remote control. Then came the most chilling revelation. In 2006, German police monitoring Arabaci uncovered a murder plot straight out of a Mafia movie. From his visitation room, Arabaci had orchestrated a plan to assassinate the prosecutor who put him in prison. He had reportedly arranged for an Albanian hitman from Duisburg to carry out the revenge killing. When authorities learned of this scheme, thanks to a secretly bugged visitor's booth, they moved swiftly. The target, a veteran state prosecutor, was immediately placed under armed guard. Rumors swirled that Arabaci had put a price on the prosecutor's head, and the threat was taken so seriously that the prosecutor eventually fled Germany entirely in 2007, when Arabaci was about to go free. Such was the fear this biker kingpin instilled. An official charged with upholding the law literally left the country, looking over his shoulder in terror. German officials were determined to keep Arabaci locked up for this deadly scheme. They opened a new case to secure Sicherungsverwahrung, a form of indefinite detention reserved for the most dangerous criminals, effectively a life sentence. It seemed certain that Arabaci, already convicted of violent crimes, would now never see the outside world again. But fate, and a bit of luck, intervened on his behalf. In court, a mistranslation in the wiretap transcripts came to light. Crucial evidence of the murder plot was deemed unreliable due to this technicality. Exploiting the error, Arabaci's lawyers got the assassination charges thrown out. In a jaw-dropping legal twist, Necati Arabaci was acquitted of the plot. The plan to keep him behind bars indefinitely crumbled. By late 2007, just a few years into his 9-year sentence, Arabaci walked out of prison early. Not entirely a free man, but free from German custody. German authorities, not wanting this red-light Don back on their streets, immediately deported him to Turkey, the country of his citizenship. They hoped that by sending him home, they were rid of him for good. Little did they realize Arabaci's ascent was only entering a new chapter, one that would extend his criminal reach even further. Istanbul, Turkey, 2008. As the sun set over the Bosporus, Necati Arabaci arrived in a city as historically steeped in intrigue as he was. For a lesser criminal, being exiled from his empire might have been a death blow. For Arabaci, Turkey became a sanctuary and a staging ground for his comeback. He settled into the vibrant Turkish underworld with ease. Here, he had the advantages of family roots, language, and crucially, no looming extradition threat back to Germany. Under Turkish law, a citizen like Arabaci wouldn't be handed over to foreign authorities. He was untouchable on Turkish soil, and he knew it. Arabaci wasted no time rebuilding his network. He reached out to old contacts and forged new alliances. Organized crime in Turkey had its own major players, but Arabaci's reputation preceded him. He was the notorious Hell's Angel who had ruled Cologne's nights and stared down German courts. That cachet gave him clout in any gangster circle. Soon, his name started popping up in Turkey's underworld gossip. If you needed muscle for a nightclub in Izmir or had a score to settle in Ankara, the word was out, maybe Neko can help. It wasn't long before the Hells Angels brand followed Arabaci eastward. In 2010, under a veil of secrecy, an international Hells Angels meeting took place in the coastal city of Izmir, Turkey. High-ranking bikers from Europe gathered, a council of the Underworld's knights. And Necati Arabaci was at the table. At this meeting, Arabaci's status within the club skyrocketed. He was appointed president of the Hells Angels Nomads Turkey chapter, effectively the head of Hells Angels operations in the country. For Arabaci, this was more than a title. It was a license to expand his empire under the powerful Hells Angels banner once again. The Nomads patch he wore signified a chapter with no fixed territory, often used by elite members who travel and conduct business wherever needed. Arabaci was now a bridge between East and West for the Angels, the man who could connect European chapters to the Middle East and beyond. With one foot still in the European crime scene and another firmly planted in Turkey, he began operating on a transnational scale. Drugs, women, and weapons flowed along these routes, and Arabaci was poised to profit from all of it. By 2013, Necati Arabaci's influence was so extensive that whispers circulated about him taking on an even bigger mantle. That year, a seismic event shook the biker world. Frank Hainberth, the legendary boss of the Hells Angels in Europe, was arrested by Spanish authorities. Hainberth had been operating in Spain's Balearic Islands, allegedly running everything from brothels to extortion rackets, until a massive police operation took him down. His fall left a vacuum at the top of the Hells Angels' European hierarchy, and Arabaci's name quickly rose as a contender to fill it. From the ports of Hamburg to the beaches of Mallorca, Necati Arabaci was seen as a potential new godfather for the Hells Angels in Europe. He had the resume, prison-hardened, globally connected, and utterly ruthless. In Turkey, he already commanded a chapter. In Germany, he still inspired fear. And crucially, he was a free man, while many other leaders were behind bars. If there was ever a moment for Arabaci to seize the biker throne of Europe, this was it. But stepping into that spotlight also meant painting a giant target on his back. Law enforcement agencies across Europe were already well aware of Arabaci's activities. Germany wanted him back in custody, and now Spain was zeroing in on him too. For years, Spanish investigators had been unraveling a sprawling Hells Angels operation on the party island of Mallorca, an operation they believed Arabaci had secretly financed and directed from abroad. The Spanish Civil Guard tied him to drug trafficking rings and high-end brothels on Spanish soil. They compiled evidence, built a case, and in 2015 they struck. That year, Spain issued a bold European arrest warrant for Necati Arabaci, accusing him of running a criminal organization, extortion, narcotics smuggling, and trafficking of women in Spain. The warrant was valid throughout the EU. If Arabaci set foot in any European Union country, he would be arrested on site and extradited to Spain to face trial. It was an unprecedented move against a man who had, until then, managed to escape long-term punishment. Arabaci suddenly found himself one of Europe's most wanted men. Arabaci's reaction? Stay far from Europe and keep pushing forward. Safely ensconced in Turkey, he treated the Spanish warrant like a distant annoyance. After all, Turkey staunchly refuses to extradite its own citizens. As long as he remained on Turkish soil or in friendly territories, the EU's justice was a toothless threat. Sources say Arabaci fortified his life abroad. There were rumors of him spending time in the Middle East, in Dubai's glitzy enclaves, where plenty of wealthy fugitives lie low, and in the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus, another haven with no extradition to the West. He traveled carefully, using private jets or unofficial routes, knowing that a single misstep could land him in a European jail. Yet even as a wanted man, Arabaci never lived like a fugitive in hiding. To the contrary, he seemed to revel in his untouchable status. He was spotted dining in upscale Istanbul restaurants, flanked by bodyguards. In the resort town of Bodrum, on Turkey's Aegean coast, It was an open secret that some flashy beach clubs and casinos had Arabaci's men lurking in VIP sections, keeping an eye on things. His criminal enterprises thrived, drugs flowed from Asia into Europe, money was laundered through front businesses, and his biker soldiers enforced his interests on both continents. But no one stays untouchable forever. In 2019, violence came knocking again. A gangland shooting in Bodrum left one man dead, a gruesome incident that Turkish media hinted was linked to an internal feud among bikers. 5 members of Arabaci's faction were arrested in connection with the murder. The trail of evidence and whispers from informants suggested this wasn't a simple bar fight. It smelled like an ordered hit, and many believed Arabaci's hand was behind it. The heat was rising. By mid-2020, with pressure from European agencies and an embarrassing murder case at home, Turkish authorities finally made a move against the gangster in their midst. On a hot July day, a team of Turkish police and special forces descended on a luxury villa in Çeşme, a seaside getaway near Izmir. Necati Arabaci, the fugitive biker boss, was caught off guard and arrested. Decades after his first arrest in Cologne, he once again felt the steel of handcuffs on his wrists, this time under the glaring Aegean sun. News of Arabaci's capture flashed across headlines from Istanbul to Berlin. Had the ghost finally been caught? Police spokesman declared it a major blow against organized crime. In Europe, investigators hoped Turkey might finally hold Arabaci accountable, or even quietly hand him over. But anyone who had followed Arabaci's life knew not to write him off so easily. True to form, what could have been the end of the road turned out to be just another narrow escape. After the dramatic arrest in 2020, details of Arabaci's fate in Turkey remained murky. No high-profile trial was ever publicized. Some say he leveraged his connections or legal loopholes to avoid serious jail time. Others whisper that he cut deals behind closed doors. Whatever the case, within a short span, Necati Arabaci was out and about once more, his freedom intact and his audacity undimmed. Which brings us back to Monaco in 2024, a place worlds away from the dingy Cologne clubs where this saga began. Here was Arabaci, now in his early 50s, strolling past yachts and casinos as if he owned the principality. Footage of him in Monte Carlo's golden streets started surfacing online, and to the astonishment of many, they went viral on TikTok and Instagram. In the videos, Arabaci often wears designer clothes instead of biker leather, a watch worth more than most people's cars glinting on his wrist. He mingles with socialites, flashes a wry grin to the camera, and slips into a Bentley with tinted windows. It's the portrait of a man who believes he's truly untouchable, or perhaps who simply doesn't care anymore. On social media, a bizarre phenomenon took shape. Thousands of viewers, many too young to remember Arabaci's violent past, began to celebrate him as a kind of anti-hero. They left comments cheering Neko on, fascinated by this figure who seems ripped from a crime thriller. To them, he's the ultimate outlaw biker who beat the system, a living legend riding off into the sunset with cops left shaking their fists behind him. It's a disturbing twist, a serious criminal gaining fame and fandom in the digital age. Yet it's very real, a testament to how our modern culture can sometimes glamorize even the darkest figures. For those who know the truth about Necati Arabaci, however, there's no romance in his story, only the stark tale of power, violence, and survival. This is a man who built his empire on exploitation and fear, who turned nightclubs into battlefields and women into commodities, who ordered beatings and allegedly murders as casually as ordering a drink. He is a product of the biker wars that once set Europe's underworld ablaze, and of the globalized crime networks that followed. Necati Arabaci's journey from a Cologne bouncer to an international crime boss lays bare the evolving face of outlaw biker culture. In him, we see how the Hells Angels and other biker gangs have transformed in the 21st century. No longer just barroom brawlers riding choppers on the highway, they've become sophisticated organized crime outfits, forging alliances across borders. Arabaci in particular bridged worlds, immigrant gang clans, biker brotherhoods, and transnational mafias. His rise was fueled by globalization as much as by fistfights. He leveraged his dual identity, moving between Germany and Turkey, exploiting legal gaps, always staying one step ahead of the law. Within the Hells Angels, Arabaci's story is already the stuff of legend. He's the man who defied the odds, who took on rival gangs and police forces in 2 countries and lived to tell the tale. For young gang members coming up, he's a cautionary tale and a twisted kind of inspiration. Proof that with enough ruthlessness, one can claw to the top of the underworld and maybe even cheat justice. For law enforcement, he represents the frustrating reality of chasing crime figures who slip through jurisdictional cracks. His very existence exposed weaknesses in international policing and border policies. Tonight, as the Monaco sky turns purple and the streetlights come on, Necati Arabaci fades into an exclusive nightclub with his entourage. The beat of music echoes, and one can't help but imagine him flashing back to those nights in Cologne long ago, when he first tasted power under the neon glow. His life has been a high-octane ride, from gritty bars to prison yards to penthouses, the kind of journey that usually only ends in 2 ways for men of his ilk: a jail cell or a coffin. Yet here he is, defying expectations, a free man in a tailored suit, carrying the scars and secrets of 100 crimes. In the end, the story of Necati Arabaci is a stark reminder that the world often isn't like the movies. Criminals don't always get their comeuppance on schedule. Sometimes they ride into the sunset, daring the law to catch them, turning their infamy into fame. It's a story with an uncertain ending. As of this moment, Arabaci remains at large, a guest in playgrounds of the rich, a ghost of the underworld who refuses to be laid to rest. And as long as he's out there, the legend of the Hells Angels' most notorious president, the underworld kingpin who bent the world to his will continue to haunt the highways and back alleys wherever the biker brotherhood rides.